March 13th, 2026, Sydney Harbour. A rusting cargo ship gets escorted in by New South Wales police. Engine trouble. Almost out of fuel, down to 200 litres of water for 11 men on board. 2 months earlier, the French Navy caught this exact vessel hauling almost 5 tons of cocaine across the Pacific. They threw the lot into the ocean and let the ship sail on, which means everyone watching this rescue already knows what this ship is. And everyone watching it also knows something doesn't add up. A syndicate that just lost $1 billion of product doesn't usually send the same ship straight back into the arms of the people who caught them, not unless there was still something worth the risk. Almost 2 weeks later, once investigators finish going through the crew's phones and devices, the AFP get a warrant and go back onto the radar. What they're looking for is whatever the French Navy might have missed. So why did a ship that just lost $1 billion shipment keep limping toward Australia instead of running the other way? And why, when police finally search it top to bottom, is there no cocaine on board at all? This is the story of the MV Raider. January 16th, 2026, international waters off French Polynesia. The MV Raider, a 40-meter Togo-flagged offshore support vessel, gets boarded by the French Navy acting on intelligence. What they find are 96 bales of cocaine packed into the hull, 4.87 tons total, worth well over $1 billion once it hits the street. France didn't have a clean legal path to prosecute the crew or seize the ship. A vessel on the high seas mostly answers to the country whose flag it flies, in this case, Togo, not to whichever navy happens to stop it. So French forces made a call: dump the cocaine, keep the ship out of a courtroom. Over roughly 48 hours, sailors haul nearly 5 tons of cocaine over the side and into the Pacific. Then they hand the raider back to its own crew and let it go with a formal warning. Everyone assumed that was the end of it. A syndicate down $1 billion, a crew that just watched their cargo sink, a voyage that surely turns back to South America. It didn't. There's a reason the decision to dump and release, instead of arrest and prosecute, drew criticism afterward. Letting the raider sail away also meant France never had to defend the boarding and search itself in front of a judge. Whatever the full reasoning, the effect was the same. A vessel that had just been caught with $1 billion of cocaine sailed off with nothing but a warning. Still fully crewed, still fully capable of doing this again. Instead of heading home, the raider turned toward the Cook Islands. Roughly a week after the French seizure, the ship entered Rarotonga waters under its own distress call, this time claiming engine trouble. It sheltered on the south side of the island through a stretch of bad weather before finally docking at Avatiu International Secure Port on January 31st. Cook Islands authorities weren't thrilled to have it. A vessel with a fresh cocaine smuggling history showing up asking for repairs put local customs and police in an awkward spot. They put the raider under 24-hour security, restricted the crew's movements on shore, and searched the ship themselves before allowing any work to begin. The ship's owners covered every cost of the stay. After roughly a week of repairs and taking on fresh supplies, the raider departed Rarotonga in early February, monitored by Cook Islands Customs until it cleared their exclusive economic zone. For a moment, tracking data even suggested the ship might be heading to Noumea in New Caledonia instead of Australia, which only added to the confusion about what this crew was actually planning. It wasn't heading to Noumea, it was heading to Australia the whole time. The mission simply kept running. In late February, Australian Border Force intercepted the MV Raider 180 nautical miles off the New South Wales coast. This is the part of the story that barely made headlines, and it's the most important part. ABF officers boarded the ship, questioned the crew about their intentions, and explained their rights and obligations under Australian law. Then they told them plainly, "You will not be permitted into an Australian port." The raider kept sailing toward the coast anyway. Think about what that means. This is a crew that had already watched $1 billion of product get dumped in the ocean by one government. They had already been formally told by a second government to turn around, and they kept going. Whatever was waiting for them at the end of this voyage, or whatever was waiting for them back home if they didn't deliver, mattered more than the risk of getting caught twice. Nobody steering a genuinely independent decision keeps sailing a marked ship toward a coastline they've just been warned of. That's the behavior of crew following instructions from people who were never on the boat, weighing the syndicate's losses against the crew's freedom, and deciding the voyage was still worth finishing. Investigators would later allege this window, the days after the ABF warning and before the distress call, is when the actual handover the syndicate had been planning all along took place. By March 12th, the gamble was falling apart. The ship radioed AMSA, reporting a shortage of fuel and food. When the International Transport Workers Federation managed to reach the crew, they were told the ship had just 200 liters of water left for 11 men, for however many days it took help to arrive. New South Wales Police escorted the raider into Sydney Harbour on March 13th and moored it at Snails Bay, a location with facilities specifically built for handling distressed vessels. AMSA coordinated food, water and fuel for the crew, while Border Force and New South Wales Police worked out what to do with them. The crew, 11 Honduran and Ecuadorian men in total, were taken in as unlawful maritime arrivals and transported to Villawood Immigration Detention Centre. But investigators were already narrowing their sights. Within 2 weeks, they would separate the regular deckhands from the core plotters, ultimately charging 5 Hondurans and 1 Ecuadorian who sat at the absolute center of the conspiracy. The politics moved faster than the investigation. Opposition figures in Canberra seized on the story as proof of border security failures, with Shadow Home Affairs Minister Jonathan Dunniam publicly criticizing the government over the ship's arrival. Maritime lawyers weighed in too, some suggesting that because the alleged conspiracy had unfolded entirely outside Australian waters, the crew might not have technically broken any Australian law by simply sailing into the harbour asking for help. For about 2 weeks, that theory looked like it might hold. Then, the electronic devices came back from forensics. While the crew sat in Villawood, AFP and Border Force investigators went through the phones, documents, and devices seized when the ship first came into port. What they found was enough to justify a formal search warrant, executed on the MV Raider at anchor in Snails Bay on March 25th. Investigators seized a satellite phone allegedly used by senior crew to stay in contact with the syndicate's bosses, based somewhere offshore. They pulled documents and additional devices they say were used to coordinate cocaine distribution inside Australian waters. Then came the discovery that mattered most. 3 professionally installed smuggling hides built into the ship's structure, one of them tucked beneath a fixed wardrobe. Investigators allege the compartments were engineered in Central America before the vessel ever set out, purpose-built to move up to 6 tons of cocaine at a time. Here's the twist. The hides were empty. There was no reserve stash waiting to be discovered, no billion-dollar surprise stuffed behind a wall. The French Navy had successfully destroyed 4.87 tons in January, but their search hadn't been perfect. They completely missed the secret compartments. Tucked away under false walls was a backup stash, a final, hidden 1 ton of cocaine that survived the French intervention entirely. Investigators now allege the evidence, phone records, documents, and forensic residue found on clothing seized from the crew at Villawood links at least 6 of the men to a prior drop-off of drugs somewhere inside Australia's territorial waters. In other words, the ghost ship wasn't hauling a hidden fortune into Sydney. It was arriving empty because the job had already been done. The starving, broken-down vessel that AMSA rescued may have already completed exactly what it came to do before it ever asked for help. On March 30th, 6 crew members faced the New South Wales Bail Division Court, charged with conspiring to import a commercial quantity of illegal drugs into Australia. Investigators believe an Australia-based arm of the same syndicate was meant to meet the raider at sea for a handover inside Australia's economic zone. The very transfer Border Force intercepted in late February. Whether that handover happened exactly as planned, happened earlier than expected, or happened somewhere else along the coast is still part of an ongoing investigation. The MV Raider remains impounded in Sydney. Its crew is before the courts, and the real question hanging over this case is exactly what the French Navy missed in January. They left a coordinate-altering fortune on board. The AFP now alleges that while the ship was playing the part of a broken-down ghost vessel, it was actually delivering that final, remaining ton of cocaine straight to local syndicates off the Australian coast. Because if investigators are right, this wasn't a smuggling attempt that failed, it was one that worked, followed by a rescue operation that Australian taxpayers ended up paying for. Every step that looked like the case falling apart in the syndicate's favor, the French release, the Cook Islands repair stop, the ignored warning, the distress call, the empty ship, may have actually been the plan holding together right up until the very end. The only thing that didn't go to script was getting caught with 3 empty hides still bearing the marks of what they used to carry.